Hey everybody, I'm Elysia Buss, host of Horsepower Empowerment Through Connection, and today we have a slightly different sort of guest. We have Stef Sifandos, and he is originally from Australia, and you know how I feel about Australians, but he is actually transplanted himself over here to Texas in the United States. He and his lovely wife. And so today, Stef, thank you so much for being here on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Now, Stef, you are our first relational alchemist. And so I think there are some people that hear that term and they're going to be like, say, what? What's an alchemist? And relational, what are they relating to? Like, how does that work? So if you could just like start by breaking that down, I think that'd be fabulous.
I'll break it down in the simplest way. So we often have, not often, but occasionally at least, some of us often have unhealthy relationships to things and people, to ideas, to habits such as maybe alcohol or drugs or partying or work or sex, pornography, life, right?
Right.
We get stuck in codependent patterns maybe, we get stuck in aggressive patterns of relating, and we fall in this category of unhealthy. So all I help you do is make the relationships that matter to you in your life healthy. Help you discover ways to create a healthy connection to the things that matter most to you. That's essentially what a relational relationship alchemist is.
Perfect. Thank you so much for describing that for us. What do you find that the people that come to you struggle with the most?
Well, it depends on who they are. I really do work with a broad range of people, from people that are really suffering in deep depression, suicidal, have mental health issues, or even personality disorders of such, to people that are really connected to their own sovereignty. They've done deeper shadow work, they've done inner child work, they've cleared trauma and clutter of their past. And yeah, sure, there's always layers because we're always growing, right? I mean, I'm in the same boat. No one is ever, I think, exempt from growth, and growth entails some level of challenge and unpacking of self to then bring that new version of self into the world. But then I work with CEOs, I work with high-level entrepreneurs, I work with people wanting to make massive impact in the world and helping them. But if I really had to narrow it down, it's people being stuck and having themselves in their own way and getting their own way from living the life that they wish to live. And I know that's a broad brushstroke scenario, and I'll keep peeling it back. So generally when I'm working with women, women are coming to me and having real deep wounding with the masculine in their life, or the representation of the masculine. And that can include men, really wanting to find themselves, understand men. Men come to me feeling often either very purposeless or lacking clarity, caught in cycles of abuse, whether it's towards self or towards others, physical, emotional, etc. And so really helping people break these old limiting patterns that aren't giving them the life that they want.
That's fantastic. I saw that you work with a balance of the masculine and feminine. So how is it that like you help men work through and discover that balance of masculine and feminine within themselves?
Well, firstly, I think it's important that we get really clear on the type of life that we want to live. And I think before we look at masculine, feminine energetics, and it's just polarity, right? It's just two wings of the same bird. Yes. And these energies reside within all of us. And so before we get there, we want to get clear on what type of human we want to be. And the masculine, feminine dynamic really just helps us understand ourselves and life and how we want to be through contrast, because we learn rapidly. We can learn rapidly. We can learn really deeply through contrast. And often you'll see, the sharper the contrast, and this has been very true in my life. In other words, the more intense the pain, the faster we can learn. And it can be an unfortunate consequence or byproduct of contrast. However, it can teach us a lot. And so when men are coming to me wanting to create balance, it's really important we focus on what's their core essence. And if their core essence is masculine, then let's cultivate healthy versions of that. How do we tap into the healthy spectrum of masculinity within themselves? And so, for example, if they're in the world and power is actually really healthy, when we're in our own power, when we're self-empowered, we're assertive, we're confident, we're clear, we're directional. But sometimes the unhealthy expression of directionality or assertiveness can be control and oppression and subjugation. So we want to move away from that and move into healthy expressions of control over our own sovereignty, or mastery rather. So we want to be switching that. So I just help men get into that healthy space within themselves. That's an example. And as they do that, that balance of expression and what they want to be in the world, do in the world, it levels itself out over time. Now, of course, that comes with greater attention, but we begin with cultivating that healthy core essence.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and it's really helpful. I always find it interesting. It's like when I talk to people, how is it that when you have men that come to you that struggle with narcissism and like a really high level of ego and how they hold themselves in that power dynamic, how do you help to unravel that in a healthy fashion for men?
Depends on the individual, depends on their own wounding, their history, how they've related to their experiences, their trauma, the key relationships that they have in their life, the patterns that they've played out. Essentially, it's creating a safe enough place for them to be open and vulnerable, to be able to share and diffuse the shame. Because generally when men are aware enough that if they're aware enough and they're coming to me with those types of issues, they're not narcissistic. They may carry some element of narcissistic tendencies, but NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder, is a very real thing and a very difficult thing to deal with. And people will not come to you and say, hey, I have narcissism. Because if they're saying that, they generally wouldn't have narcissism.
Right.
And so,
no, that's what I was thinking. Maybe if they came to you like looking at a different aspect,
yes.
while still having like the narcissism. So they're like, I'm not coming to you for this. I'm coming to you for this over here. But then you're like, but then over here, and it's not just men, obviously, like women absolutely have narcissistic tendencies at times and ego. And like, it's not just that I'm trying to point the finger at men.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just always curious how people unravel that, because typically in my personal experiences, when you run across people like that and you try to challenge them at all to bring any sort of light on that being a problem, that they can be a bit reactive if they're not ready for it.
Yeah, you're right. They can be. And so creating that safe space and that trust where that man can be seen in a non-judgmental way by another man, and even by, if I'm working with groups of men in this, because we're speaking about men right now, there's that witness is very powerful in diffusing the shame and diffusing the false pretense and the false bravado that comes with protecting oneself. And as we delayer that, then we're able to get into other aspects of self, deeper fears. Again, I won't say narcissism, because it's very difficult to point out to someone that if they actually have NPD, that they have NPD.
Right.
Very, very difficult. So if it's a tendency, extreme expression, we can work with that. That can be worked with. But again, it begins with, it's not so much a softening, it's more of an opening where that man can, or any person, just feels that they can trust, that they're not being judged, there's compassion there. And then in that safety, then we can open up into deeper areas.
That's beautiful. I really appreciate you like diving into that and touching on the fact of shame, because we do have so much shame that goes on in this world. And how do we help to hold people accountable without that shame, without invalidation of what it is that they're going through? Because I think that's definitely a big part of the problem of why people don't open up as much, because they struggle to be held in a safe space without shame or invalidation. Which is a big part of like why we do what we do, right? So that we can create that opening through relationship and a healthy space. I would love, since you brought up the word codependency, we don't get to hear a lot about codependency. So having that like broken down from the aspect of a man, I think would be really beautiful for the audience.
Yeah, of course. So codependency is an interesting one, because essentially when we look at it, and there's different, I don't say different meanings, but there's different ways to look at it. But essentially we're relying on something outside of ourselves that's pretty way out of our control, in order to feel good about ourselves, in order to feel connected, in order to feel loved, in order to feel validated, in order to feel enough, in order to feel full or whole, right? So this is what we do. So we look to others, maybe. So if you're in a relationship, your sense of self-worth, your sense of being validated, of being enough, is predicated upon how someone treats you or how they see you. If they're unhappy, you make that mean that, in extreme forms, oh, I must have done something wrong. I am wrong. And then the shame and the guilt comes in. And then we start behaving in ways that isn't really healthy. So we start behaving in ways around, I'm going to people please. I'm going to contort myself to make sure that this person is happy. I'm going to minimize myself. I'm going to maximize others. Like those are the types of actions that we take. And most of these codependent patterns develop from unhealthy unhealthy parent-child dynamics, right? And an example is that a child carries the burden and the pain and the responsibility of a parent's well-being, and they learn as they grow older. They learn that if they can make their parents happy, that then they will feel happy, they will feel worthy, they will feel of usefulness, they will feel enough, right? And so it becomes this cycle of feeling wounded and never feeling enough, always having to do more for other people, always prioritizing other people, always relying for other people's opinions of you in order for you to feel whole and full within yourself. And so, I mean, codependency is deeper. We can go super deep into codependency, but there's something to it.
Yeah, I know. That's a lot for people to take a look at, and to be able to own that that is something that they do without the shame or invalidation, that it's a problem, and giving themselves value. Like, how do people step into that and decide that they get to assign value to themselves instead of looking for other people to assign value to us?
Yeah. That's very true. And when we're codependent, we struggle to say no. We struggle to speak our truth. We struggle to be seen. We struggle to share ourselves. Yeah. Codependence really, really breaks us down in so many different ways, and we don't become a full expression of ourselves in the world. We essentially hide from the world. We squash our own dreams. We experience like a trauma, like a low level or even high level trauma. We're always on alert. We're pessimistic. We come from a scarcity mentality. We carry fears of being judged and rejected and abandoned. And all of this has potentially stemmed from a very young a childhood where we weren't seen, where we weren't positively reinforced, where we weren't told how to be or shown how to be, or we weren't accepted for who we were. We were always told we were wrong, or we weren't valued. You'd come home with a grade of a B, and your parent may say, well, that's okay, but what about the A?
Right.
And then
I don't know anything about that at all.
Yeah. I hear that. We're stuck in this cycle of, well, now I'm dependent on doing well at school or performing. So I'm codependent with performance in order to feel full.
Right.
To feel enough.
No, that makes sense. Thank you for all of that. So what started your whole journey? Like, why did you start down this road as a relational alchemist in the beginning?
Yeah. Dr. John DeMartini says that our voids become our values. And so as a kid, I felt very disconnected and isolated and alone. And as growing into a teenager, I really felt I wanted to serve and connect with people and really help people move out of their own stuff. But we teach what we need to learn the most. And it was really a cry for my own help, and really me trying to help others was me wanting to heal myself. I didn't know it at the time, but I was fascinated with the mind and fascinated with authentic leadership and servant-based leadership. And I was fascinated with how do we help each other be better human beings.
Right.
So I just experienced so much volatility and violence in my own family dynamic and in my environment that I thought there has to be a different way. And I'd watch TV with my grandparents, and we watch National Geographic, and my grandparents would watch the news. And I mean, I don't watch TV these days, but it was just a lot of pain that I was seeing around the world and war and everything else. And I thought, this just doesn't feel right. I was just emptiness in my own self. And so I started that journey, but not before I really hurt myself and hurt a lot of people along the way, because I wasn't, I was using this fascination with the outside world and other people to distract myself from my own pain and trauma and shadows. And so I kept leaving this self-destructive path behind me everywhere I went, in my intimate relationships specifically. And so it became something I had to look at, and I really didn't until my very early 30s. In saying that, I'd started the personal development from a very young age, because my mother exposed me to that, but it was always surface level, superficial, couldn't quite get there, wasn't taking advantage of it, wasn't open fully to it, was very closed off, pretending to be open, very intellectual. And so integration was a big part of my journey, and it came with a lot of pain, you know, feeling, being suicidal, being on my edge, losing my mind, being almost bankrupt, being in massive debt, losing close friends, infidelity, sex compulsion, sex addictions, you know, issues with alcohol and working and performance and all of that, and you know, having to gain social status and be the best at business, and but it was just so extreme and volatile because I was just mimicking my past that was unresolved. Right. So I really had to go deep into that, and I stopped sort of living the life that I was living for a good few years, and just really. I went in, I went all the way in, and that included spiritual healing, working with shamans, psychologists, counselors, being length and solitude, somatic work, sexual somatic work. Like I really went deep.
So I think a lot of the audience probably doesn't know what sexual somatic work is and somatic work, if you'd like to expound upon that.
Sure. So psychosomatic, sexual somatic work is really just mind-body work. So looking at, it's not just cognitive therapy or psychotherapy where we're rewriting the narrative of the stories of our past or rewiring even neurologically our brains. We're really going into the body and shifting the trauma and the pain at a cellular level that's connected with those unconscious and conscious experiences. And so the somatic work, there's literally body work in there whilst going through therapeutic sessions. And we can access the unconscious self through breath, through somatics such as that, through other means, hypnosis as well as some of them. And I'm schooled in all of that. I went through a lot of that myself, and because it worked for me so well, I then educated myself formally in those areas and really integrated a lot of that in the work that I do with people now, whether it's in large groups or whether it's in an intimate one-on-one or small group setting.
Right on. Well, thank you for sharing all of that and your vulnerability. We do appreciate all of that.
Appreciate you.
You're welcome. It sounds like quite the rite of passage over a course of time. And at what point did you have like your first, like when did you take your deep dive into seeing clients? Like what did that look like as a journey?
You know, I started seeing clients from a very young age, actually. I started seeing clients from 22 years old in the psychological counseling, because I was studying my degree of behavioral science, social psychology at university at that time. I just started studying after I'd come back from working on international cruise ships for a number of years. And you know, I was working with people in health and wellness space before that, but then I started doing NLP and counseling with people and integrating that. And I started from a very young age, and then doing body work and somatic work with people. I'd learned ayurvedic, the body side component of ayurvedic medicine, and you're just very blessed to be around pretty exceptional human beings and teachers, particularly when I was away traveling a lot. And yeah, I started early and I just really continued it. But I really, really lent in a few years ago where I just said, I was always doing it for years. I owned gyms. I had one of the first CrossFit gyms in Australia and the world at that point. And we're seeing people there from physical wellness perspective, but also mental health and wellness and mental resilience conditioning, working with special ops military guys, Olympians, gold medalists, elite world champion fighters and so forth. So I was doing a lot of mindset work there. And still do work with elite performers if need be. But it started young and it just morphed and transmuted over time, but really went all in and sort of burnt the bridges a few years ago. Yeah.
Did you ever, that's interesting, especially with all those different people. I love how you pay attention, like you, like the bit large view of life, how we pull in people that are meant to teach us things, you know, to share our stories, and that we'll tend to pull in the same sort of people until we learn the lesson that we're supposed to learn from them.
Yeah, I like the way you put that as well. And I think even at the time, for me, I'll speak for myself, obviously, at the time, sometimes we don't appreciate those people when they come into our lives, you know. And again, I'll speak in my language. I haven't appreciated those people when they've come into, because I haven't been ready for it, and I haven't been able to really embrace the fullness of their wisdom, you know.
I do know.
Yep.
I humbly do know.
Yep. I've arrogantly known for many, many times, and it's taken me a while to humbly learn that.
Yeah, no, I understand. I was more arrogant in my youth as well, and I used to joke that God had to knock me down not one, not two, but 3 times since I've had 3 low back injuries and a head injury in the last 10 years. So I've had other struggles in between, but like that was the particular one that gave me a lot more compassion and for people and patience and the ability to not always be the white knight and to ask and like receive help, not always be the one giving it, which can be difficult for people sometimes when you tend to be more of the stronger type.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, but that's the beautiful thing about life. If you can just keep your heart and your mind open to the experiences, you will go a lot farther, a lot faster, with a lot less pain. If you can just shelve the ego.
Oh, the ego is an interesting thing. You know, we speak about dissolving the ego, but we can't dissolve the ego until we integrate those wounded parts of ourselves that allow or force the ego to keep protecting self, you know, and keep
exactly
head, you know.
It's like, instead of dissolving it, it's more of like, I see you, thanks for letting me know, and now we're going back to what we need to do.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's more what I mean about shelving. And because like you said, the wounded parts of ourselves, like the ego, and I tell people, I'm like, learn to love your triggers. I don't remember where I heard that phrase recently, like in the last couple of months, but I love it because it just shows us where we are and allows us to have more accountability for ourselves. Because so often when people have triggers, they put the blame on somebody else. They're like, oh, you triggered me, I'm mad at you. Instead of being like, oh, you triggered me. What do I have to do for myself to stay in a healthy place and articulate my needs and take the space that I need when I'm in an irrational space because I've been triggered, so that I don't increase the wounds inside of me and wounds inside of another. And that's a level of accountability that I found most people they're not ready for.
I agree with that.
Yeah, but we all get to work on ourselves. You know, it's not, and like they're not ready for that from a shaming standpoint. Like each of our journeys takes the time that it takes. And we can want something to change at a rapid pace all we want, but you have to use the proper gradient, you know, to nurture and honor the space and the time and allow it to flow and not be forceful about it.
Yeah. Well, we live in a quick fix, short-term gratification, high-performance world where we're really predicated, our value is predicated on our output. And so we become very impatient and we can't see the forest through the trees, and we make that mean that we're wrong or we're not enough, or we're not capable, when the reality is that we just need to lean in a little more and trust.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an interesting thing that I run across sometimes in the life coaching business that I would love to hear your viewpoint on in regards to abundance mindset. I found that a lot of coaches talk about abundance mindset that are less likely to refer to others and get cranky when people promote on their platforms or anything that happens for them in that realm. Right? You know what I'm talking about. That people get cranky about. They're like, I've spent so much time and effort like building this platform and doing all of my work. But I find this to be just a very fascinating thing to get to bring up to people. Like, if we truly believe in the abundance mindset, shouldn't we be okay with it all?
Well, should's a very dangerous word, but yes. So I'll respond in this way. Life is full of hypocrisy. Right? Life is full of hypocrisy. We don't own our hypocrisy. Anytime we're transitioning from something old to something new, from something unknown to something known, we immerse ourselves, whether we like it or not, consciously and or unconsciously, in a hypocritical state. Because we have a conscious idea, which is a few percent of the actual mind, of what we want to do, want to achieve, want to be. And then we have the unconscious self, which makes up 95+% of who we are, saying, don't know about that. That's unfamiliar. That makes that's too new. I'm going to come back here. So you're deliberately saying all these things to the world, like abundance mindset, abundance coach, wealth is for everyone, or there's limitlessness and infinite this and infinite that, but the body is still in scarcity. And so you're not being disingenuous, you're just being naturally hypocritical until you get to the point where, and this is for me, this is for all of us, until we get to the point where we actually let that past aspect of ourselves go. We're not so attached to it, we can step fully into that space of, this is what I'm claiming, this is what I'm owning now, my actions are matching my words. And sometimes that fake it till you make it, it can play a pretty important role in our lives, because what it does is we're verbally making a statement to the world that this is who we want to be. And if we can carry enough accountability and integrity within ourselves and surround ourselves with people that see us and feel us and really can support us, we can move out of the old into the new, or move towards what we really desire a lot quicker. The issue is that we shun hypocrisy. We don't like hypocrisy because it's conflicting, it's confusing. And if it's confusing, it's unsafe. So we make people unsafe. And making people unsafe is that we think we're out of control. And so we want to, excommunicate that, shun that, see you later, not interested. And so I think, again, if we can be a little more calm, and not even calm, but more inviting and more open, I think we can change that. And we can say, oh, okay, so you're stuck in a bit of a vortex right now. You're stuck in a twilight zone where you're claiming something, but you're not quite there. Yeah, that's cool. That doesn't make you a bad person. How can I support you? Or what can I learn from you as well? And that type of conversation. But we've got to heal a lot more of our past, really be more present, engage in healing modalities such as, whether it's something like breath work, self-care practices like exercise, meditation, solitude practices, to really ground ourselves so that we can create space in our responses as opposed to being reactive in life, right? And so that abundance mindset, look, we live in a world of IP. We live in a world of plagiarism. We live in a world where what's mine is mine. People come from selfishness and scarcity. We live in a world of ownership, whether it be property ownership or ownership of something else. And so these underlying cultural values and norms and ideologies also permeate our way of thinking, particularly unconsciously. So we're very protective of our stuff.
Sure.
And I'm not saying don't give credit where credit's due. Absolutely. We that's healthy to do that, because at the end of the day, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. I'm not saying anything new. I'm saying it in my way, but what is my way? I'm an accumulation of everything that's come before me, every person I've had contact with, everything I've read, everything I've seen,
right,
everything I've experienced. So there's no fucking original. There's nothing that's original. And so, we get really attached, because then we're talking about self-identity. Right. Now our identity is wrapped up in this IP or this product or this platform or this service or this idea or whatever it is. And if you have a wound around that, and an example could be that you were a kid and you were playing and your toys were always taken away from you by your older brother or by your parents because they just didn't like you, because they were just mean, then you're going to have a thing about mine. This is mine. This is mine. You're not going to move and shift from that 2, 3, 4-year-old selfish, self-absorbed, hyper ego little child. That attitude is going to permeate your 35-year-old self or your 40-year-old self. But now you're just doing it with IP and business and money.
No, it's true. And I really appreciate that you brought all those things. And I enjoy bringing that conversation. And it's funny, I don't actually talk to anybody or research. I don't know where anyone stands on that experience when I ask that question. So I'm like, oh, this may or may not be triggering for this person, but I don't know what the reality is. So I'm going to ask it. And it's just a beautiful thing for all of us. And the concept of being human, because it is a journey, it is a process. And just because we may or may not be consciously being hypocritical in a moment, and if I had an instructor one time, and he's no longer with us. His name was Paul Smith, and he always used to say, assume positive intent. And it's this really beautiful thing. And obviously not everyone has positive intent when they interact with us. But sometimes people do things and they're busy and they don't think it through, or they're genuinely ignorant about something, but their intention was positive, right? And then they interact with somebody, and we have to honor boundaries, right? Because we're all allowed to have them, and if you don't want somebody on your platform promoting their stuff, just be like, oh, hey, you probably were just assuming positive intent, right? You're just like, hey, maybe you just didn't think it through or whatever, but this is what's important to me. This is what I'm trying to do here. And this is my boundary, and I'd appreciate you to respect it or whatnot. And some people might be like, I shouldn't have to take the time to do that. and be like, well, like, you just have to decide what's important to you and how you want to interact with human beings. And that's got nothing to do with anybody else. That's just like your journey, right? And how we get to decide to walk through life. And that's what makes all of us individuals.
Yeah.
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 And so it's a fascinating conversation to have with people, because oftentimes we get to have uncomfortable conversations. And I feel like very few people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy you had to be held accountable today. That was just like the best experience ever. Oh, it just feels like a warm, cozy blanket. No, I don't think that happens very often. But after it's done, if we're really open in our heart and our mind, like, isn't it beautiful when we get to go to that next space and like look at things and decide how we get to interact with the world after that? So
I think if we come from that place, it firstly requires a lot of practice, a shit ton of awareness. But if we can come from that place, I think we would find we would create a life for ourselves on this planet that is probably quite different to what it is now. Be far more inclusive than exclusive.
yeah, it does take practice. And how do we have grace with ourselves and with other people through that practice?
For me, the simple answer of that is doing the inner work. Is just being constantly aware of ourselves, being willing to go into the places that are unknown, that are mysterious to us, that carry some form of truth and wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And surrounding ourselves with human beings that allow us the space to do that, right?
Well, our environment is very important. You know, the more that we surround ourselves with people that align with our vision and our values and who we are, the greater the opportunity to expand our own sense of consciousness and self.
Yeah, absolutely. People that we trust and that we feel nurtured by. And so I'm also a teacher, like elementary and middle school teacher, and I find building authentic relationships incredibly important, because especially with kids, right? And if you come from a loving authority instead of an oppressive one, and then people and like kids, they understand that when you hold the line, they know that it's coming from a place of love, not a place of oppression.
Yes. Well, that's the word. Before you said the word oppression, it was the word that was in my mind as you were saying that word. So yeah.
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 Everything just works better when you come from a place of love and authenticity.
Yeah. We're so averse to it, right? We run from it like the plague. We're so scared. We don't know it. So many of us don't know what love is, love without conditions. You know, and I'm not talking about unconditional love. That's probably a separate conversation, but just love without conditions. Like, you don't have to be anyone specific. You don't have to perform in this way. You don't have to look a certain way. You just intrinsically carry value and you're loved for it. That's a very, I mean, I'm not meaning to come from a place of lack and scarcity, but the people that I work with and what I see in the world, it's rarer than what it isn't. But I think we're also moving towards that, though. We're embracing that authentic love, we're embracing that genuine, intrinsic value that we are able to see in other people who come from a different place.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to hit the bottom before you can rise to the top.
It's definitely been a big part of my own personal experiences, yeah. I think that's where the collective consciousness is right now. And I'm personally not naive to think that we're not going to have a lot more conflict before that evens out, before the intensity and the peaks and troughs of that, the extremes of peaks and troughs evens out. I think that's part of our human nature that we are growing out of collectively.
Yeah.
That's going to take some time.
Yeah. Just lots of people like us.
Yeah. Converging realities, like just just changing the narrative, changing what's possible.
Yeah.
It's got to begin with us. It's got to begin with us, meaning it's got to begin with you. It's got to begin with me. It's got to begin with just our own selves. There's something powerful about that grassroots movement and the top down as well. And so, can we rise within ourselves and can we look to collective leadership to make changes as well? But, part of the collective leadership, the parts that make up the whole of collective leadership is the individual as well. So there's this, reciprocity that's taking place. And I think we're seeing it in the world. I think we are. I think we're seeing a lot of changes right now with what's happening. And, to simplify, I think we'll go one of two ways. I think we'll either move into the descent of humanity, and not in a healthy way, and the decline, the moral decline, the socioeconomic decline, the cultural decline, the technological decline, or we'll see a spiritual, psycho-emotional, physiological elevation, a DNA upgrade on every level. Not only physiologically, biologically, but also psycho-spiritually.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting time to be alive in history.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hold the line.
We're going to need some tough, resilient, compassionate, open-hearted people to hold that line. It's not just about love and light, because from my perspective, it's not just about love and light. That's a big part of it. And there's going to be some tension that's going to have to be worked through.
No, definitely. That's why I talk about that loving authority, is that you work out of love, but you hold the line and you don't cross it.
Yep.
And it's like, this is just my boundary.
Well, that's interesting, right? So I speak to this often. I question this often. I think about this often. What is holding the line? It's if you're working with a lower level consciousness, or you're working with a reactive consciousness, or you're working with violence, what does holding the line mean? Does that mean you become a Mahatma Gandhi and you allow people to physically hurt you, bury you, kill you? Or do you hold the line and meet that energetic with the lower level vibration that's being pushed onto you? That's a big question. Are people willing to, love and light, but what are you willing to do to hold your line?
And that's a really great question. Yeah. So the way that, for me, the way that I hold the line is, so like I'm a single woman and I travel a lot. Like I've cumulatively traveled about 27,000 miles across the United States in the last 6 years by myself. And I never worry anywhere that I go. When I used to dance salsa, and I'd wear these fun, like scandalous outfits, not because I wanted to pick people up, but just because it was fun. And I would walk to my car by myself at 2 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't afraid. And I wasn't afraid because I didn't walk as a victim, but I also didn't go to dangerous, stupid places by myself, right? And if somebody did come to challenge me, then I would just have a conversation. Like there was this one time, so that I'll answer this in 2 pieces. So there was this one time where there was this guy, he was with 2 girls and he was with another guy, and he was mocking me because I had this particular outfit on and I was walking a little tougher that night. It was late. And so he was walking behind me, pretending to be like me. And I just turned around and I was just like, listen, and like, I'm a single woman walking by myself and you're being a fucking asshole. I'm like, and you can either step up to the plate and walk me to my car, or you can continue like just being here and being a jerk about it. And I was just like, and I just looked at the girls. I'm like, you should be ashamed of yourselves for like reinforcing this behavior. Basically, I was 22. I'm 40 now. Like it's a difference. And when I told him, I was just like called him out on his bullshit. He just kind of looked down, and then he told me that he would walk me to my car. And he did, and he was respectful for the rest of the way. So that's one way to just like face that and just be like, call it out, be like, this is what it is. Either you can step up or you can step back.
What if you retaliated with physical violence?
Then I would have stood up and I would have defended myself. And that wouldn't have been a very pleasant experience, probably for either of us.
That's right.
But he definitely would. It would have been unlikely for that to have worked out very well for him, because I don't have a problem doing that. So, but if it would have turned into a 4 against 1, then that would have been a very bad thing for me. But it would have been highly unlikely, given the dynamics and gauging the energy of the people, because it's about that too. It's about gauging the energy of the people that you're interacting with, and those micro expressions in their body and body language that makes you consciously aware of what it is that you're stepping into, so that you can make the best decision possible in that situation. Yeah. The other way, in present time, as a 40-year-old that's done a considerable amount of work on myself, is that the way I face it is to be able to like look people basically deep in the eyes, engage their energy, and help them with emotional regulation. And I just look them in the eyes and I'm like, I see you. Not or like I don't need to say that, but I meet them in a way with energy, and I'm just like, I see you. Like I understand that dark place that you're in right now. Like, how can I support you in that experience? Because very few people are truly evil. Most people that are lashing out really just come from a place of pain and confusion. And if you can just meet them there and honor that that's where they're at, my experience is that most people will de-escalate. And they'll create a space that when you're not judging them and you're just being open with them, that they'll be like, oh, okay. And then even if it just gives you the tiniest sliver of an opening, then you can bring them to a place to help regulate. And when you help people regulate, that helps give them a healthy power to be able to move through something.
Yeah, I look at that the evolution of consciousness as transitory. It's not static, it's in constant movement, and there's adjustments that need to be made. And sometimes in order to grow and expand, we have to contract. And sometimes we have to meet aspects of ourselves through expressions of others. And that can be really ugly for us, or perceived to be ugly, but it can also be deeply liberating.
Yeah. And if you could, most of us, there's a spectrum of light and dark within us all. And
Yes.
most people, they tend, in my experience of the people I've interacted with, most people aren't really comfortable in acknowledging the darkness inside of themselves. But if you're struggling with the darkness in the community, you struggle with the different things that come up inside of yourself, the easiest way to deal with it is just to acknowledge that you have darkness inside of you. And then when you meet it in someone else, you don't have to judge it, and you can see that person in an authentic fashion and then move from that space. But if you're not willing to own it within yourself, then you're definitely going to ridge a lot harder against it when you run across it in a situation, because it's going to trigger you.
Yes.
You know? And so, in people, they do things that are violent, they do things that are unkind. And I'm not saying that what those people are doing is acceptable by any stretch of the imagination.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm just saying that it's a lot easier to just be like, I see you. How do we move through that? And like the bully at school is usually the kid that's in some of the worst pain. And if you can either shame them and tell them they're a terrible person for being a bully, or you can mindfully protect yourself and create space to give them healing for the trauma that creates the dysfunctional behavior.
Yeah.
It's choice. Do you want to treat the symptom, or you want to treat the cause?
Yeah, and that's where we've got to go to the cause, and we live in a society of treating the symptom. And that's what I learned through ayurvedic medicine, is the preventative methodology and approach is far more powerful than the curative one.
Yeah. Exactly. So we just have to do our best to be positive role models in the world and support others as the best we can, while still holding like healthy levels of accountability and supporting the transition out of those spaces, instead of the accountability that's like
Yeah, I hear that.
So, well, my friend, we've had some wonderfully deep conversations this afternoon.
Yeah, we have. Wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I love to end these interviews on is, who inspires you in the world today?
Do I have to limit it to one person?
No, definitely not.
Right. My beautiful wife inspires me. My brother inspires me. So many of the people that I surround myself with, my friends, inspire me.
Beautiful.
I inspire myself with some of the choices that I make.
Nice.
And I'm really, really grateful that I'm able to see that. The mirrors in my life, the people that trigger me, the people that upset me, the people that I perceive to cause a ill feeling or dense feeling within me, they inspire me. Uh, there's many authors behind me in these books that definitely inspire me. Um, Swami Satpriyananda inspires me. Um, really connect to him deeply. Um, Life inspires me. I get up in the morning feeling really excited. Breath it inspires me. Yeah, yeah. Even challenge itself inspires me. So it's not just so much of a who for me. It's a what as well that inspires me.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. You're very welcome. Is there anything that you would like to promote for what you're doing, where people can find you? I'll put your links below and all that different sort of stuff. But is there anything else that you'd like to offer before you leave?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many um, entry points into my ecosystem in terms of working together and journeying together. Whether it be, whether you're a woman that's searching for love but deeper union, sacred union, and connection. And my wife and I have a program called Be the Queen, but it's so much more than just dating dynamics and love. It's all about self-love and really healing a lot of the past in order to be open for the future that one deserves. We have amazing inner child level 1, level 2 workshops as well. I mean, that's for everyone. I have the one-on-one, the private coaching that we do. We have retreats next year, men's work. There's so much going on. But if you go to growwithstef.com, you'll find a lot of information there. And even my full website, stefanos.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much for being here with us today and for all of your wisdom. We all really appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. You're very welcome. All right, everybody. Until next time. Bye.